back to the good old days for Max Verstappen. He takes to the top step for the first time since the sprint race in Austria, and the first time since Spain in a Grand Prix race as well. Max Verstappen takes the win here at the US Grand Prix sprint race ahead of Carlos Sainz and Lando Norris, who enjoyed an almighty battle over the last lap of that 19-lap dash that more than whetted the appetite ahead of the US Grand Prix tomorrow, and qualifying later on for that as well. James Hinchcliffe, excellently called, sir. Will Buxton, we enjoyed that one watching. What did you make then of Max Verstappen and how comfortable that looked, ominously so for McLaren and Lando Norris?
It's funny, isn't it? Because we came into these last 6 races and we're talking about that championship fight and saying, well, you know what? In these last 6 races, 3 of them are sprints. That's extra points that Lando can use to cut back this championship gap. But he probably hadn't accounted for the fact that Max Verstappen had until today and continued today to win every sprint in 2024. He may not like the whole sort of weekend format of having to do the sprint, but my goodness, he's pretty good at sprint racing.
Yeah, he's all right. He's doing pretty
bad,
well at them.
Yeah.
Hinch, how did you enjoy that one?
It was great. I mean, there was so much passing. There was so many battles on the racetrack. Fine, they weren't all at the front, but on the last lap, changes up on the podium. The tire degradation, I think that's what's good about these sprint formats. The teams don't have all the information going in. So you see the likes of the Mercedes struggling at the end, the McLaren struggling at the end. So I thought it was great. We had action from start to finish over the 19th.
What we did see yesterday actually was Ferrari performing really well on that medium tyre in the 1 hour of practice we had. And they performed pretty well in that sprint race. The sun's just gone in, but when it is out, my goodness me, it is hot, and actually much hotter than what we saw yesterday. So the unknown's become even bigger, Will, in terms of actually what long-run data can look like here.
Yeah, it's still difficult to know where everybody sits after that race, but I think one of the teams who'll be feeling the best right now is Ferrari. It's a team that turned up with no upgrades on their car. They were fast from the outset during practice with that solid foundation of a car that they knew that they hadn't tinkered with. They could just go straight into it and really just buckle down to understanding the new surface out there. That may have paid really into their hands, because while everybody else, particularly McLaren today, and you say Mercedes towards the end, started to drop off at the end of the 19 laps, Ferrari still had pace in hand, and that will be hugely beneficial for them and will give them a lot of confidence going into the Grand Prix tomorrow that, you know, maybe they can do what they did at Monza a couple of months ago and maybe look to just eke out those stints on the tyre.
I'm just hearing in my ear, Lando Norris is under investigation for driving erratically.
Oh, interesting. I heard he'd been noted.
That last lap?
Yeah. Moving under braking in the defense.
In the defensive moves.
Yeah,
I know you didn't think he did.
He didn't move. He stayed on line. It was the wrong line for the racing line, but he never actually moved. Let's take a look at the onboard here from Charles Leclerc. You expect the car to start fading to the right. He just never does it. So he has the right to choose his line after that kink in the corner. So I would be very surprised if there was any consequences as a result.
I think in terms of driving erratically, it's not always line. It could be that he braked earlier, and they may be looking at whether he brake checked him going in there, and they're going to want to look at the brake trace.
Counter argument being, if you're braking from the inside, you have to brake earlier.
Oh,
you know, so it's I'd be disappointed, to be honest. That's racing. That's good hard racing. Heads up from Leclerc to get around him. I mean, it was close. But, I mean, that could have gone either way. I don't think that should be a penalty.
I mean, we do have examples earlier this year of Fernando Alonso, of course, back in Australia getting that penalty, and he was much further ahead than George Russell, but was given that pen for braking too early and, you know, catching George out and George spinning it off. But I guess it depends if they look to penalise, whether they penalise the action or the consequence, because Australia, for me, was about consequence, not necessarily so much about action. So if you look at it on the basis of consequence, there was no consequence. If you look at it on action, maybe that's what they'll look into. But I think I'm kind of with Hinch. You know, it was a great day of racing, defensive and attacking from so many drivers out there today.
I love that the racing driver is like, never.
Let it go. Let it go. I think Charles has got on the radio because you have to, right? That just seems to be the rule in F1. Anything that could be a gray area, just make sure you record it. But I think it's fine.
We'll keep you up to date if we do hear anything about where and how that will affect Lando Norris and his performance, and indeed the points he was able to get from that sprint race. 54 points is now the gap between Max Verstappen and Lando Norris. We came into this weekend with a 52-point gap. Lando Norris having to outscore Max by around 9 points a weekend. His task has got just that little bit more difficult, hasn't it, Will?
The tagline for this weekend and going forwards for the last 6 races, every point counts, and that is as relevant for Max Verstappen as it is for Lando Norris. 2 points could make all the difference come the end of the season, but it's the big one tomorrow. 26 points up for grabs. If we get a flip reversal of that, Max has a bad day tomorrow, Lando has a good day, Max could still make a net loss over the course of the weekend. That's how brilliant this championship is right now. Every single session, every single lap of every single Grand Prix matters because every single point counts.
It takes just one DNF, doesn't it? And this whole thing could flip on its head once again. All right, great stuff. Laurette Nicol is in the paddock for us. She's picking up some interviews from our team principals. She's with Zach Brown.
Zach Brown, just wanted to get your assessment of your two drivers. Unfortunately for Lando, it looks like he had a little bit of a lockup. What do you think happened there?
I was struggling with tires there at the end. Drove a great race, great start. I think the Ferraris look like they'll be the team to beat tomorrow. The Mercedes is definitely very quick over a lap, but I was a little bit surprised to see them fall off as they did. I think Max is within reach. Oscar drove great. Disagree with the penalty that he got, but it didn't really matter as far as he wasn't in a points position. So hopefully we'll have a good qualifying this afternoon and 2 cars at the front tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this track was resurfaced. Do you think the bumps got to Lando a little bit?
I think everyone was starting to struggle with their tire wear except Ferrari. They looked to be really strong. Obviously Max had the benefit of being in clean air the whole time, so definitely a tricky track. Warmer today, bumps, new tarmac, and a difficult circuit. So not surprised to see a lockup here or there by some of the guys out there.
Zach, thank you so much for your time. Best of luck tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach Brown. Thanks to Laurette for the questions as well. Yeah, tyres were screaming, weren't they? Because the temperatures have risen today. We welcome Ruth Buscombe now, Ruth Buscombe-Divey. Tyres screaming out there, Ruth, weren't they? And we saw that lockup from Lando Norris that allowed Carlos Sainz through with a last lap lunge to take P2. What did you make of the tyres, Egan, and how much perhaps it was more than expected?
Well, you know, they were learning on the job there, which is, you know, this is what we like to see from our Formula One drivers. And I would say it was a tale of two halves. It was actually the Mercedes being the complete outliers, of especially of the top 4 teams. But actually, they had the highest stake of anybody. They were on average about 0.12 seconds a lap, which was almost double the field average of 0.06. Now, is that to do with the setup? Is something that makes you fast over a single lap round here can also hurt your degradation, or is it with how you actually manage the stint? Now, the really cool thing about sprint weekends is all of the teams get to have another bite at the apple. They have now done a full 1 lap qualifying, a full race stint effectively, and they're going to be able to adjust the setup and try again. So cars that were really fast yesterday over 1-time lap may adjust and may take a bit more of a hit in terms of race pace. We could see already the Red Bull was pushing a lot more than the McLaren, but overall the stint, it was actually fine.
So you're saying there's hope for my fantasy team yet?
There is hope, Laura, there
because
is
I
hope.
took Carlos Sainz out, which was devastating, and put in George Russell, who
gives everyone
fell
a
away
chance
a little bit with those tyres. But just back to Carlos Sainz and that Lando Norris lockup moment. Hitch, how did you see that? Because the comment, it was almost a commentator's curse, because you were like, last lap, he's got to stay ahead, and then, poof, the lockup happens, and Carlos Sainz threw on the inside.
This was such a well-executed race from Carlos. And I said it in the booth, his balance between aggression but calculated moves, I think was brilliant. Going into 1 on that last lap, he wasn't really close enough to make a move. He just did that little fade to get in the driver's mirror, and Lando just struggling enough with the tires, got distracted maybe a little bit, and that's all it takes at that phase, a little bit of lockup, and that's what made the move possible. So it was a very savvy drive from Carlos today.
And you could see Zach Brown's reaction there on the replay, because he knows at the end of the season, when we tally up the points and they look at where they lost points this season, those kind of moments, almost unnecessary moments, they could be the difference between a world championship and a second place.
I was going to ask you, what does that say about Lando's mental headspace in absorbing pressure when he's under it, coming into a last lap in second place with his title contender up the road, some 2.5 seconds? He's got to hold on to the points he has, and he lost one there.
Lando's in a position he's never been in before in Formula One, and we were asking at the start of the weekend, who would the pressure tell on the most? Would it be Max Verstappen? Would it be Lando Norris? Listen, we've only had 1 day of full competition since this late autumn break, but so far you've got to say Max is doing everything he needs to do, and we saw a little mistake from Lando during sprint qualifying yesterday. We saw another mistake from him again today. He cannot afford to keep making those mistakes if he wants to be taken seriously in this championship battle.
And look, no one is harder on themselves than Lando Norris is, and he will know exactly what mistakes he's made and where, and he'll be hoping to rectify them. Luckily, as it's a sprint weekend, they get another bite of the apple. Qualifying coming up later on a Grand Prix tomorrow. And this is to take nothing away from Ferrari, actually, James, and their performance today, because they enjoyed an incredible battle amongst themselves and against Lando Norris and George Russell, maximising everything they could from that race.
I mean, they really did. For a sprint race, for Carlos to move up the spots they did, started 5th, finishing 2nd. But, you know, Zach sort of made the point. Their tire degradation was super impressive overall. It was good even compared to Max. What made it so much more impressive is they did both spend majority of that race running in dirty air. You know, I was comparing Oscar Piastri's lap times in those last few laps of clean air running compared to Lando's. Remember, Lando was running relatively clean air, struggling with his tires at the end. He was still about a second quicker those last few laps than Piastri, who'd been running in dirty air. Those Ferraris were running in dirty air the whole race, and they still had pace in hand at the end. So it's definitely a good sign for them. Looking forward to tomorrow if the temperatures stay up like that. But it is a different tire, most likely, we're going to see. We know they're good on those mediums. Tomorrow's going to be about the hards.
What I loved from today, particularly from Carlos and from those Ferraris, turn 15, right? When these guys watch that race back, they're going to see a point to overtake that before only the really, really brave have ever tried, and very few of those moves have ever come off. Today, that was their hunting ground. They made it their own. Those moves at 15 were impeccable. And that, as I say, that is not an easy place to pass. It's not a usual place to pass, but that Ferrari made that their playground today.
I was just thinking, I'd love to have known what was going through Fred Vasseur's mind on the pit wall, watching his two cars just dinking it out, wheel to wheel. Luckily, he's with Lorette.
Fred, congratulations on a 2nd and a 4th. Some exciting racing there between your two drivers. Was there any point that you thought maybe you had to come over on the radio and tell them to back it down?
No, because I think it's very up and down all over the race for everybody, that you have the pace, and the lap after, if you push on the tires, you have the pace. The lap after, it's more difficult, and I think it would have been a mistake to do it. I trust them. They did a good job, that they avoid to have any contact, and at the end of the day, they were able to come back on the top 2 to overtake Lando, and we are not that far away of Max. I think it was the good strategy and a good race for the team and the drivers.
And did you get enough data on the medium tire to apply to tomorrow's race?
Yeah, that we did a stint, that tomorrow we'll have 3 stints probably to do, but at least on the tire management it went very well, that we are still quick at the end. Even if we had to fight at the beginning, it means that I think that probably we'll be in a good shape also tomorrow.
Fred, thank you for your time. Best of luck.
Thanks to Fred, thanks to Lorette. Yeah, plenty of data. All of our teams have learned here on the medium, but of course there'll be plenty of hard running tomorrow in that Grand Prix as well. Fred will be looking ahead, won't he? Because while we're looking at the battle between McLaren and Red Bull, actually Ferrari aren't that far behind Red Bull, and second could be an incredible achievement for them. Yet they haven't brought upgrades here, importantly. Will.
And Mercedes as well. You know, Lewis was catching George towards the end there. I know George had knackered his front left, but Lewis was coming on fast at the end of the Grand Prix. I think everything points towards a thrilling Grand Prix tomorrow. I don't know what you think, Ruth, from kind of looking at the numbers and diving into all of that, but Ferrari have got to go into it feeling confident. Red Bull have got the wind under their sails again. I just think it looks mega.
Yeah, it does certainly look like they kind of put last year's race around here to bed, where they did struggle with tyre deg. Obviously, Charles dropping with that kind of aborted one stopper. And I think they've learned, and that's so key around here. It's not just how fast you are over one time lap. Race pace is king. You want to establish a good starting position, but you don't want to give everything away in terms of your setup. And I think they are going to be there tomorrow in terms of really racing those Mercedes. And if there's any mistakes from a McLaren or from a Red Bull, they're going to be right there on their heels, just as we saw today.
I think Mercedes will be disappointed with today from where they started, the pace they had yesterday, the fact that Lewis said, had I not seen that yellow, I was 4 tenths up, I could have been on pole. One lap pace looks blistering from them, but race pace on the medium, it seems to have fallen away. And Lewis Hamilton on the radio just saying to Bono, don't talk to me under braking. I can't imagine the frustration for a driver in that moment.
It's the #1 rule for driver-engineer communications. Every driver has said it to every engineer they've ever worked with. Sometimes it just happens. But no, what's interesting about the Mercedes situation is even if Hamilton had started on pole, I think they would have finished where they did. Just the level of degradation they had was so high. But all is not lost. because let's look at the difference between those cars from FP1 to qualifying. They absolutely turned it around. So now that they've got the opportunity to bust these cars open, go back to the setup sheets, make whatever changes they want with the knowledge they've gained from this sprint race, we've seen them do it in one session. Turn a car that wasn't fun to drive and not fast to easier to drive and quick overlap. So let's take a car that's maybe a little hard on its tires over a stint, make it a little more nurturing to those Pirellis, and I think they can definitely be in the fight tomorrow.
Well, Lewis Hamilton, look, it's a 5-time winner here at COTA, a 6-time winner of the US Grand Prix. If he does win here, he'll be another Michael Schumacher record he's joint with at the moment. Will, he's got 6 races, yes, in an era-defining Mercedes tenure. What's the dynamic and the relationship going to be like in that team? Knowing, yes, they have 6 races left, but also knowing he's off to Ferrari.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's obvious, and the team admitted from the start of the season, as did Lewis, that there will come a point in the year where Lewis isn't included in as many meetings when they're discussing next year and the car and the future and their plans and all that. And it's just natural whenever any driver leaves the team. The same will be happening with Carlos at Ferrari, with Esteban down at Alpine. You know, these guys moving on, you have to start closing them out. But listen, we dealt with it earlier in the year as well, because there was, online conspiracies that the team were actively acting against the best interests of Lewis. I don't think you have to worry about that. There's so much love, warmth towards Lewis, what he's achieved at that team, how much of a huge part of that team that he is. To think that the team aren't going to give him every opportunity to excel and to finish that relationship off on a high, I think that's crazy for anybody to think that. They want, and for them, they want to be moving forwards as a team. They want to be putting in the results, because that momentum will take them in to their new era without Lewis.
And for so many, his win at the home Grand Prix at Silverstone this year will be one of the highlights of the amazing 2024 season we've had. Let's hear then from Lewis.
Hey Lewis, from what you learned today in the sprint, does it give you any kind of hope that the Grand Prix and qualifying later today might be a bit better?
From sprint race, doesn't give us any hope, for sure, but yesterday it felt pretty decent.
Do you have to make a lot of changes, do you think, between now and
I
quality?
really don't know. The car was just massively oversteery in that session, which was very odd.
Well, better luck for quality.
Thanks.
Very odd is what Lewis Hamilton is saying about how his car was handling, how his car was feeling. And luckily, the cars are now out of Parc Fermé, Ruth. They're heading into qualifying later on. We know that Mercedes went well over 1 lap, but what kind of work will be done between now and the start of qualifying?
Honestly, it's an absolute nightmare when you're in this situation, because as we've said, you can make it better. If you remember back to the earlier sprints of the season, you can also make it worse.
Yeah.
By overcorrecting a problem and introducing a new one, because you don't have the virtue of a free practice session to actually test your wonderful engineering ideas. He's right to be slightly annoyed. He wants to win, as you say, right to the very end. Every single race he wants to maximise the points, and if you think you can be on pole and then you're kind of being overtaken because the car is, as you say, you could see from the onboards, it was very, very oversteery. And here that increases the wheel spin, increases the deg, and then you get yourself into kind of credit card debt in terms of it just causes more and more and more, it makes it across the stint. And remember, the cars are having about 40 kilograms of fuel in them. Tomorrow it's going to be 110, and they're all going to probably want to start on that medium tyre, so it's going to be even tougher.
I can't wait. I can't wait for it. Look, we had all the usual suspects in the top 8 scoring points. Perez and Piastri moving up to P9 and P10, making up really good ground after disappointing qualifying sessions for them yesterday. Haas.
Yeah.
Double points in a home race for the team, on a race in which they've brought upgrades that are on. They were on, what's his name? Nico Hulkenberg's car. Magnussen, they've sort of obviously split that data, so they're learning lots as they go, and they're still scoring double points with both cars.
Yeah, I believe Kev's getting the upgrades now, actually, before quali for the Grand Prix. Not just double points at home, but we've been talking about how important a sprint weekend might be for the smaller teams playing on positions 6, 7, 8 in the championship. They've moved ahead of RB in the championship, level on points, but because they had a better individual result, ahead of RB in the Constructors' Championship. That is massive for Haas, absolutely huge. You cannot look past that.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda, P11, and Liam Lawson on a debut here at COTA from a P16, but all the momentum going Haas's way. Just quickly then on the teammates in the championship battle, Sergio Perez and Oscar Piastri, I guess damage limitation to an extent today, but they'll be looking to support Lando Norris and Max Verstappen and get a good result in qualifying this afternoon, won't they, Hitch?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on one hand, with Oscar's situation, he's kind of supporting Lando in the Drivers' Championship standpoint. I think Perez's job is really more trying to support Max from the Constructors' Championship standpoint, trying to stop that bleeding that team's got. You've got 2 drivers scoring strongly at Ferrari, 2 drivers scoring strongly at McLaren, 2 drivers scoring strongly at Mercedes. Red Bull's kind of on a bit of an island there. So that's, I think, Checo's job today in qualifying. Make sure he's starting up front, puts himself in the mix for some good points, because that's what the team really needs right now. Max is going to take care of Max on the Drivers' Championship side, but Checo really needs to step up for the team right now.
You need both drivers firing on all cylinders, don't you, Ruth?
Yeah, I mean, and especially on a race weekend like this, where the teams are so close. You know, one tiny error in qualifying can put you 3 positions. I think the start, we saw again, that was so critical, and it will be the same thing tomorrow. And then we have lots of different options in terms of pit stops, whether you want to undercut, whether you want to build a tyre advantage and overtake on track. Apparently now we're overtaking in turn 15 when we've got a low-speed advantage as Ferrari. So it's even more action tomorrow. I really think it's all to play for.
Especially with all that we have swirling around the Red Bull seats and the V-carb seats. So then who slots in where? Yuki Tsunoda was not happy, was he, with Oscar Piastri and with the battling that he had. He took the battle to Sergio Perez, though, didn't he? What did that mean?
Took the battle to everybody. I love that version of Yuki. I love a fired-up Yuki. Look, he's punchy, and he's trying to prove himself as being worthy for that Red Bull seat, because he's strangely been out of the conversations. Like, Red Bull have just made up their mind that he's all right for the V-carb seat, but he's not quite good enough for Red Bull. I love how fiery he is. I love when he gets his elbows out. It was great to watch. Brilliant battle with Piastri, brilliant battle with Sergio in a car which has nowhere near the legs on it that McLaren or Red Bull does. Watching him keep pace with them, I thought that was a really strong performance from him today. He did all he could.
He's putting himself in the shop window, isn't he, with Red Bull? But, I mean, why is he out of contention? Why isn't he being mentioned for that? Because time and time again, and certainly last season, he was dragging that AlphaTauri V-carb up to where it didn't have any right being.
It is a bit of a mystery, isn't it? I mean, if you just kind of look at it on paper, you take names and experience and everything out of the equation and just look at points scored, results on track. He was handily taking care of Ricciardo and kind of had been for 2 years. It is a little bit of a confusing situation. Yesterday he out-qualified Perez. You know, fine, Sergio got him in the race, but he's doing a good job. You know, you read something this morning that Honda's really pushing for Red Bull to give him a test in the main team car. Just let him get in the RB20 at a test. Let him show what he can do in that car with direct data to compare against Max, and then make a decision. And you know what? I think that's a fair shout. I think he deserves a shot to at least see what he can do in that car. It is a different car. Everybody talks about how it's harder to drive. It's Max's setup, all these things, but you don't know until you know. I think you give him a shot.
Liam Lawson, though, his task coming into this weekend, match Yuki Tsunoda. He hasn't quite done that. He does have a grid penalty as well to serve. But what did you make of his performance just before we hear from him?
Listen, it's a tough weekend for him, obviously jumping into the seat to car. He doesn't know a track. He doesn't know it was always going to be hard. I think utilizing the sprint as an extended test session, very good kind of idea there. I'm sure he was pushing every single lap, and we're going to hear from him, as you say, in a moment, so he can tell us exactly what went down, but nothing to be worried about. You know, you can't use a barometer on him against Yuki just yet. You've got to give him that time to level up. And it's a strange weekend. It's a sprint weekend, so they're not going to decide after one day. Let's, give it a few races.
Absolutely. Let's hear from Liam Lawson.
Hey Liam, I know you had all to do from where you were starting today in the sprint. Just talk me through how it all went for you.
Tricky starts, tricky first lap, and then I think we just dropped off a little bit earlier than others. I lost a spot that I probably shouldn't have with Ocon. Well, guys, I don't know who it was actually. I can't remember, but to one of the Alpines, and then then you're just in a train. To be honest, it started to come towards us at the end. I think the pace wasn't so bad, but it's just when you're in a train like that, it's really hard to overtake. You need a clear pace advantage, so some stuff to figure out for tomorrow.
Well, good luck for quali.
Thank you.
Liam.
Yeah, Liam Lawson in at the deep end, and he's of course got that engine penalty as well, so his result in qualifying he'll look to maximise, but plenty to learn on his opening weekend for sure. Anyone else impress you through that sprint race, or any other business that we haven't quite covered off yet? Ruth?
Well, I thought Franco did a very good job too. I mean, it's first time racing round, you know, just as Liam's, and this is a tough old track to drive. especially, you know, in terms of that high-speed section. I felt like he really held his own. But yeah, for me, it was the Haas, the home heroes, and the way they work together as a team, the unlikely duo as they always are. They do love each other deep down, don't they? And they really work together in terms of holding up that whole DRS train, because, you know, you had the likes of Checo, you had the likes of Oscar in that train, and every lap they kept them behind was so critical in, like, you know, keeping as much margin as possible and bringing home those two absolutely critical points for the championship. Sprint weekends scare and joy midfield teams because they change championships every year, and Haas today have come out on top so far.
I'm going to echo that sentiment. I mean, they were so impressive. A double point score for Haas is an incredible weekend. In a sprint race, it's even more impressive because that's only down to the top 8. You replicate that result tomorrow when full points are on order. We talk about that 3-point swing, how important that is. That'll be a massive chunk of points if they can replicate that similar sort of position tomorrow. So much credit to them. Magnussen doing a great job after Nico's bad start. He kind of held up his end of the bargain, held Nico behind him with the upgraded car. So both drivers, and then Nico rebounding from a bad start. So both drivers doing a great job, the team doing a great job on home ground. They're, you know, one of the drives of the day.
Kev might not want the upgrade this afternoon. He might just want to stay with the car that he's got. Listen, I think Franco, okay, he lost positions, but I think he's done another sterling job in that car and on a track that he doesn't know, and he's entering the mix of conversations about driver moves, and, you know, might Red Bull even have a look at Franco Colapinto, you know, who knows. But I got to say, conversely, a team that I'm really worried about now, again, I spoke to Valtteri Bottas in the pit lane before the race, and he says, we've got upgrades this weekend. We're going to know in this race. If we can fight with other teams, I'm going to be really happy. If we can't, then I'm not. It's another really hard step for Sauber, and particularly for Mattia Binotto, for Jonathan Wheatley, who'll arrive there next year, and for the Audi project, because it doesn't matter what they seem to do to that car or what they bring to it, they are stuck rigidly to the final 2 positions in this sport, and there is an awful lot of work to do.
Nothing, it seems, they can do at the moment. Yeah, pretty gutting for Sauber. They do get a chance at qualifying later. Let's see what time that will be. Here is your schedule for the remainder of the weekend at the US Grand Prix. So, your sprint race winner then is Max Verstappen. And heading into this weekend, 4:30 p.m. for your pre-qualifying show, 5 p.m. for qualifying, and then post-qualifying show immediately after that, battle for pole at 6 p.m. Then your pre-race show coming on air at 12:50, building up to the race start, and of course your post-race show immediately after the podium as well. So we'll be back a bit later on. Then we'll be back a little bit later on with the pre-qualifying show. I'm just hearing that Bottas stopped on track actually after that sprint race with a brake fire. So more trouble for Sauber. I think we can see it now. There you go. Ooh. Blimey, it's not what they want, especially with a car full of upgrades, is it?
That's both sides. And a car that has to be ready to qualify in a few hours. This is just an amount of work the team did not need.
That's the wrong kind of Texas barbecue.
Yeah.
Yeah, plenty of work then for the Sauber garage and Valtteri Bottas to do ahead of qualifying later. Your thoughts then ahead of that? We had a taster yesterday. We've had a taste of what that long run data may look like in our sprint race. What does that tell us about qualifying here? Longer qualifying sessions as well, and no mandated tyres.
Well, I mean, that RB20 upgrade, you know, it is a joy to get to watch Max Verstappen drive a car that he can ride the curbs in high-speed sections. You know, it is phenomenal to see that so close at the front. I want round 2. I want to see our 2 championship contenders go for it again, and I'd like to have a really close finish that we can analyze the data in depth.
Yeah, Lando Norris is by no means out of it. Yes, he's lost 2 points to Max Verstappen, but it's still on, isn't it, Hinch?
Well, very much so. I mean, everything we've talked about is, hey, if Lando wins everything, Max can still finish second. Well, if he finishes third, that's more than a 2-point difference, right? So losing 2 points, yes, suboptimal, as we like to say in the engineering side of the sport. I'm learning. But it is not all lost. Like you say, one bad day, even at 10th place, he gets 1 point, but if Lando's up at the front, that's a 24-point swing. There's so many points still left, and there's so many teams that are competitive. This is absolutely still all up for grabs.
As Ruth was saying earlier, the choice for all the teams right now is evolution or revolution. What do? Do you just tinker, or do you go for the big changes to try and take a really big step going into qualifying? Sprint quali was close, and what we got was a really enthralling sprint race. My hope, as Ruth says, Round 2, bring it on. 4 teams split by nothing. It's got to be perfection from all of the drivers. No mistakes allowed from here on in.
Oh, it's going to be a thriller. Do join us later on then, 4:30, building up to qualifying for the US Grand Prix. Thanks to Lorette for her interviews. Thanks to Ruth, to Hinch, to Will Buxton, to Alex Jakes in commentary as well. To all of you for watching. Come and join us later for qualifying. We'll see you then.